Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session today on D365 US Payroll. And joining us today is Whit from NAV Payroll, and we're excited to have such a fantastic turnout today. Before I pass it over to Whit to cover on this topic, I just want to let you know that the session is being recorded and it will be posted to our on-demand webinar library for you to review and share with anyone. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to type those into the questions box and we will get them answered during our Q&A time at the end of our session. And so now I'm going to pass it on to Whit to kick off our presentation.
Thank you, Angie. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I am Whit Lester with Primo Payday, introducing the D365 US Payroll solution. The one thing that seems to be pretty consistent with these webinars is obviously we're presenting to a group of people, and each individual has probably unique business requirements within your business that may or may not be able to address in a broad setting such as this. So my objective today is to give you an introduction to some of the basic capabilities of this payroll solution. I'm then going to show you how it integrates and some of the detail that you can leverage within payroll and disseminate that throughout the rest of your ERP system, such as job information or job tasks, things like that, and how that information can flow through the GL. And then we will talk about our employee web portal. We'll then go over some basic payroll reports and some of the reporting capabilities. And then I'm going to touch on some of the areas of the solution that allow for the configuration of more complex requirements. So if you have unions or if you have unique calculation procedures that need to take place for certain sorts of deductions, we'll talk high level about that. And then we'll talk high level about our advanced overtime setups as well. When we get into real specific questions, I'll do my best to address them on this demo, but it may be a situation where we need to set up a time with Innovia and you and us individually to be able to configure the demonstration to show you exactly how it would be pertinent to your particular business requirements. But with that being said, let's get started. So within the Business Central Business Central Payroll solution, you see here, if you're using the Payroll Role Center, you've got some quick links to be able to get to employees, to be able to get to payroll processing or batch payroll processing. We've gone ahead and added a full payroll menu as well. This just allows you to still use your mouse to navigate the solution and not have to use the search functions. So first, let's just start with some of the basic stuff and look at payroll employees. So this is an example of an employee list. We'll open up an employee, and you can see here we have a variety of different information within this card itself. One thing to keep in mind is that this is a custom employee card. This is not the base Business Central employee card. There's two reasons for that. One reason being it makes support of the payroll solution a heck of a lot easier because you're not having to rely on constantly keeping ahead of whatever Microsoft wants to adjust in their employee card. But also with a custom employee card, we've been able to add a variety of new fields and features that allow you to track unions, dimensions, tied to resource numbers, track managers of employees, EEO filing, things like that. So as you can see here, we've got name, address, phone number, general information here, communication information here. When you get into the administrative information, you've got employee types, payroll statuses, payroll divisions, labor costing, the ability to track shifts, badge numbers, login and password for the employee portal, EEO codes. If you're going to tie to a resource number, you can do that here as well. And then if you're going to add a department code or project code, you can do that here as well. Positions and unions, same thing. If you're going to add positions or union codes, position categories, you can do that here in the position and union section. You've got personal information, you've got salary information, which is flowing through from the salary table. You've got direct deposit information. Up to this point, the most direct deposit accounts we've seen on one employee is 3, but you can have as many direct deposit accounts as you want. and then you've got federal withholding information and ACA setup. Now, you can also have state withholding information on the card itself as well. For demo purposes, I've put state separately to be tracked by effective date. So within the solution, you can set up federal and or state/local taxes to be tracked by effective date. If you decide to use that functionality by tracking it by effective date, it might make it a little bit easier to keep track of the history of the tax status of that individual. And then also, if you use the tracking by effective date, that allows you to have employees that work in multiple tax jurisdictions in the same pay cycle and have that be accounted for accurately. Within the employee card, another thing to mention is the create new employee wizard. There's a lot of fields within the employee card, a lot of information that needs to be tracked or can be tracked and can be inputted. So with the create new employee wizard, the wizard will walk you through the steps of entering unique information for an employee. And then once you get to and then you can elect to use a payroll division template to auto-populate all the information related to salaries, deductions, and PTO time. So that can all be auto-populated using templates that you have designed. All right, so that's a very brief overview of the employee card. Let's talk for a second about salaries. Let me just open up one here. So when you're setting up a salary, you can track the starting date of the salary. You've got any and all pay cycles that you could possibly want to utilize. You can choose to use hourly salary or even piece rate types, depending on how you're going to be calculating the employee time here. You've got you can put an overtime multiplier here if you've got a very basic overtime calculation requirement. If not, we can talk at least a little bit about the advanced OT setups. In this case, this individual is overtime exempt, and that's a very brief overview of salaries. One other thing I should mention is that since we are tracking by starting date, if you do need to pull any reports on this information, that's also going to be available, so long as it's being tracked in a linear fashion in the salary setup, and it's not if you're doing the thing where you kind of delete, where you just delete the current setting and just create on that same line the new setups, then obviously you will not be able to report on it. Deductions. So if you're on Business Central or on NAV, you're familiar with pay codes. So you're going to create your deduction codes. And then you can apply those deduction codes to the employee deduction table and make the necessary adjustments. So in this case, are you going to be calculating this by a percentage of gross wages? Is it going to be a fixed amount? Is it going to be based off the union deduction table, the spouse dependent table, or the benefit calculation procedure? So earlier I mentioned that we're going to go over the basic high-level aspects of the system, and then later we can touch on, or at least talk to, some of the areas of the program that users don't interface with on a daily basis per se, but it helps, it's what opens up the solution to configure the system to your unique requirements, however broad or complex they may be. And so these areas are where we'll touch on those here in a bit. But basically, you can tie, in essence, you can tie this code to a specific calculation process in order to handle more complex calculation requirements. So if you set percent of gross wages, what's the amount or percent you're going to be withholding or deducting? And then we've got our limits here auto-populating. So one thing to keep in mind within this solution is that tax tables are automatically updated with using our master tax table. So anytime a state or federal tax table is adjusted or changed, you will see those changes typically within a week of that change taking effect. Or by if there's an announcement that there's going to be a new deadline for a change. For example, Minnesota had one earlier this year. Then we'll have those available by the deadline. And part of the tax table updates include deduction limits and contribution limits for prevalent deductions such as 401ks, HSAs, FSAs, health insurance. So you will not have to worry about keeping track of those deduction or contribution limits either, because they'll be automatically updated by the tax tables. All right, and then we can talk a little bit about PTO here. So PTO time, same kind of concept. You've got codes that are going to be leveraged to maybe you just have one broad term PTO. Maybe you have personal days, sick time, jury duty, whatever it is. You can configure that, configure those codes to be available, and then you can apply them to your employees. You can apply them manually. Kind of, I'm walking you through the process here of doing it manually, so that you can see kind of the what's available as far as configurability out of the box. But you can also, as I mentioned earlier, leverage those templates to auto-populate this information when you're creating new employees. So in this particular case, we've got an earnings code of personal day. You can set the starting date for when time can start accruing for that particular earnings code. Are you going to allow a year carryover? If so, you would check this box. With the hours set up, you can determine, is there going to be an hours limit for this particular earnings code? Are you going to have a carryover hours limit? And if so, what is that? And you can also determine if you're going to allow negative hours. So, maybe it's a new employee and they can accrue up to 80 hours in a year starting on day one, and their kid gets sick and they have to miss a day. Are you going to allow them to utilize negative time? If so, you check that box. You've also got the ability to do a lump sum setup, and then you can even do an hours accrual setup if you want the ability to calculate, hey, based on X number of hours that my employee works, I want them to get 1 hours of time accrued. That's how we would do that, is with the hours accrual setup. All right, so that's real basic introduction to employees. Hopefully everyone is still awake after getting through that piece. Let's talk a little bit about hours detail. So when you're processing payroll, obviously you're going to have salaried employees, and then you're probably going to have some hourly employees. This solution does not come with an out-of-the-box time and attendance tracking system, okay? So you will have to utilize either an existing time and attendance system you have in place. Maybe you're using timesheets in Business Central or NAV. Maybe you're using some other third party, whatever that may be. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. Wherever you're tracking time, so long as that time can be exported in a CSV or text file, which is pretty much every system out there, then we can import that time into our hours detail table, okay? And so this is kind of a sample about what an hours detail table may look like. So you've got the date, the employee number, the employee name, time, and then as we scroll on here, we can see the additional detail that can be included in that time. So maybe you've got a particular job number that this employee is working on, or a job task, or maybe there's a position you want to be tracking, or a union code you want to be tracking, or a project code or department code, or state, whatever the case is, prevailing wage codes. All this information can be pulled into the hours detail table, and then when it's used to process payroll, you'll be able to track that in the background, and then that'll flow through to the GL for reporting. So by leveraging a system, by leveraging the integrated payroll system, you're going to be able to post this detail very quickly to your GL. So this is a sample of like an hours detail table. So now let's look at, for example, an actual payroll document. Obviously, you're going to be processing payroll in most cases in a batch setting, but to kind of show you what the detail looks like, we'll open up an individual payroll document. So here's an individual payroll document. And as you can see here, we've got the breakdown of the hours, the 401k plan, the health insurance, the federal income tax, FICA, state, SUTA, FICA, then the direct deposit. So we pulled in hours for this employee. So if I go to the payroll expense allocation, what you can see is that in the background, even though on the payroll document itself it's just saying 80 hours, you've got all of this detail that's flowing, that's going to be flowing through the document and flowing through to GL, and will be part of your financial analytics moving forward. Okay. Once again, one of the big aspects of this system is for the ability for you to leverage the payroll data that you have access to and use it in your financial analytics. So this is an example of a payroll document. I'll go ahead and at least briefly show you what a batch process looks like. If you want to set up a batch, you would literally just go to batch payroll processing, and there is a quick link for that in our homepage, in the initial homepage of the user interface. But you can click here and go to new, and you're literally just going to select the pay cycle, and then you're going to select the pay cycle period, the pay date, and then you can filter, use any filters for salary types, or if you want to filter by direct deposit employees, however you want to do it, you can do that. And then once you set up your batch, you're just going to have your batch, and then you'll be able to select the employees, and at which point you're going to be, if they're direct deposit employees, you're going to export the file, and then you're going to print your check stubs, and then you're going to post. So really, the process is really quite seamless. So once you post, then you've got all that information that's flowing through to the GL. So if I go to a payroll ledger entries here, I'll just try to show you an example of some detail here. So we've got payroll ledger entries, and then if I pull up a, if I pull up an actual entry, there we go, and I want to navigate and see where it's touching on the GL. You can see here in this particular case, there's 14 entries hitting the GL or hitting these other areas of the system. You can zoom in on that and get all of that information. And we can see all of the pertinent detail related to that entry. All right. Okay, so we've touched very briefly on employees. We've talked very briefly about hours detail. We've talked very briefly about payroll processing and payroll ledger entries. Let's spend a few minutes talking about the employee portal. So it's going to make me re-sign in. That's fine. So you've got your employee web portal. The employee web portal opens up the ability for additional HR components that are typically a part of anyone's payroll process. The really cool part about this portal, outside of its general functionality, is that it doesn't require your employees to have Business Central or NAV licenses to use it. So typically however many licenses you currently have available is all that you're going to need, because it technically is leveraging one license that's being used to communicate with the NAV system. But at the end of the day, you're not going to have all your employees buy NAV or Business Central licenses to have access to the portal to submit time off requests or download pay stubs, things like that. So let's just go through some of the available functionalities of this portal. It doesn't all have to be, this is configurable, so we can only present the options that you would want your employees to have access to. But they can enter hours detail. Once again, is this like the world's greatest time and attendance system? No, but if all you need is real basic time and attendance functionality and you need a solution to do that, this is an option. As you can see, you can enter the usage date, the earnings code, the hours, and then you've got available detail that you can add if you want them to be including a project or a job task number, so on and so forth. Here's where you can enter PTO requests. So are you going to be, you want to submit PTO time, here's where you would do it. That'll then flow through back to the, depending on if you're a manager or not, it can flow through to the hours approval screen, which has a quick link here, which you can then select and approve if you want to, or decline if you want to decline the time. Posted payroll processing is where employees can either download or view prior period pay stubs. Pay stubs and check stubs are completely configurable. Sorry, I had to get some coffee there. They're completely configurable. So don't feel like if you see this particular setup that this is the only option. You can. The whole purpose of this program is that it's configurable to the unique requirements of any individual company's needs. So, example of a check stub. Go back to the main menu here. You can take a look at your hours request history. You can take a look at your PTO history. You've got timesheets here as well if you want to be utilizing timesheets. And then we get into some of the cooler features where you can where the employee can submit change requests. So they can submit change requests for personal information. They can submit employee dependent information as well, and they can submit changes to their benefits. So with the dependents and with the benefits, this opens up the capability for you to utilize open enrollment with this employee portal. So you can, with the dependents table and the employee card, you can have that information available to pull through to the portal, and then obviously changes can be made to submit to the to Business Central or NAV. But at the end of the day, you're going to have the ability to register for benefits and dependents using the portal, which open enrollment seems to be a pretty big topic for a lot of, if payroll departments are working closely with an HR department, that seems to be a pretty big request. And then we've got company documents. So you can post documents to the portal for your employees to review. Okay, so they can review these documents. Maybe it's, in this case, it's a DOT document, or maybe it's a new employee handbook, whatever the case may be. You've got that information that can be posted. And then if you want, you can allow them to post signatures as well. So they can submit a signature and it'll timestamp and affix to that document. So then if we go to, and then that'll flow through back to the system. So if we go to Ron Swanson in this case, and we go to HR information and go to employee document signatures, we can see that they signed off on the handbook at this particular date and time. All right, so that is the overview of the employee portal, and I understand that there's going to be questions at the end here, so I'm going to do my best to kind of get through some of these areas so we have plenty of time for questions. Let's talk a little bit about reporting. So there's a plethora of reporting options here, but the two that I really want to touch on first are federal reports. So 941s, 940s, W2s, W3s you can print from the system itself. The W2 report you can also export into an electronic file. So if you've got more than the minimum number of employees, you can export that to the electronic file and submit that electronically. The other main area for reporting is the payroll configurable layouts. In essence, configurable layouts is it's an ad hoc report writer. So you can create any report you want based on any pay codes that are within the system. You can group those pay codes and filter them in whatever way, shape, or form you need to do that to generate the information that you need in the layout that you need it. So in this very simple example, we're doing an EFTPS report. So we've created a report where we've grouped both sides of FICA Social Security together and grouped them as one column. We've taken both sides of FICA Medicare and grouped them together in one column. And then we've taken federal income. Okay, and so we've grouped those together, as you can see here. And then if I run that report, hoping there's data in here, which I believe there is. And then what you can see is that it's going to give you the calculation for Social Security, Medicare, and FIT when you're typing that into your EFTPS website. And once again, that's a simple example, but it can get a lot more complex. So once again, we've talked very briefly about U.S. tax reports, ad hoc report writing. So what I'll do now is we'll touch on at least a few key areas that are kind of the main tools that are utilized to configure the solution to unique requirements of for end users. The first one we'll touch on is the pay matrix. So if you have a let's see here. Okay, so let's say you got unions or particular jobs or departments or positions, whatever the case may be. Maybe it's just they're working in different states or what have you. But if you have a requirement where rates are going to vary for individuals depending on certain criteria, like I said, maybe it's a union they're working for, maybe it's a position they're working in, maybe it's a job or job task that they're working on, or maybe it's a combination. Maybe it's if they're working on this job number in this state, then it's this rate. But if they're working on this job number in this state, then it's this rate. Our pay matrix functionality is how we're going to how we accommodate those requirements. Just once again, before we dig into these areas, I want to just preface the fact that in 99% of the time, this is always part of the initial setup of this system. Okay, so it's not like end users are going to be tasked with having to set this all up on their own. But as part of this demonstration, to give you some at least insight into the depth of capabilities of this product, we're going into these areas. But please don't take this, the last part of this demo, don't take from it that you have to do this all by yourself, because you certainly don't. There's a team of Innovia professionals and a team of payroll professionals that are here to help us help configure these two business requirements. But as you can see here, this is just a sample setup of kind of the parameters that could be in place to then arrive at a certain rate. So when you're pulling hours into the hours detail table, the pay matrix is going to rely on the information that's in that hours detail table to help determine a rate. But this can be, maybe it's as simple as there's only two headers that need to be kind of managed. Maybe there's 10 different parameters, but the scope of the parameters doesn't matter. Just the fact that you can coordinate and automatically calculate different rates based on parameters that are being pulled into hours detail. That's available by leveraging the pay matrix. Let's talk very briefly about process procedures. If you have process procedure codes or process procedures, in a lot of cases, businesses have there's some unique requirement whereby either a particular deduction code, maybe it's life insurance as an example, or maybe it's like New York State disability insurance would be another just example off the top of my head, or any other number of examples. But anything that involves any sort of complex calculations, we're going to accomplish that using the process procedures. And basically what the process procedures do is we're able to take a pay code and then add an additional calculation to that pay code to arrive at whatever total needs to be arrived at, okay? And as you can see here, you've got any number of criteria that can be leveraged in order to calculate whatever total needs to be determined. But whenever we have customers that have, hey, well, I got to have this particular calculation, we're going to be using this tool to do it. And I mean, in essence, it's basically just it's instead of having custom programming in the background, we've brought that to the client-facing side of the system. So it's basically bringing some of the back-end configurable techniques that a lot of companies use and put that in the front end. and it certainly makes it, it can help streamline the implementation process. It certainly empowers end users to be able to make their own calculations instead of relying on a programmer to do it for them if they want to take the time to learn how to do it. And it also helps with saving time when it comes to updates or upgrades. And then, let's see here, OT list. The other portion we'll touch on is our new feature release, which is the advanced OT setups. And at a very high level, the advanced OT setups is how we're going to accommodate any sort of unique OT calculation requirement that that can be thrown at us. And basically, you'll just be taking a code and then determining your settings. Are there going to be overtime or double time multipliers? And then you've got additional overtime settings and double time settings that can be configured. I think I've gone through this incredibly fast to give everyone a real taste about what the system looks like. Angie, at this point, if people have questions, I will do my best to answer them.
All right, thank you, Whit. And yes, we do have a few questions that came through. The first one is, does it have the security capability to lock executive salary and bonus information from being seen by a certain level within the organization?
The answer is yes. There's two different levels of security. First off, you've got payroll users have to be set up. So even if you've got a Business Central user, you still have to have a unique, not a unique, but you still have to be set up as a payroll user within the system to be able to access it. There's also going to be log notes that are tracking in the background as well. So if somebody does want to log in, if they're a super admin user for Business Central and they want to set up a payroll user and take a look around and then leave, there would still be log notes of that activity taking place. So the first step is obviously being able to set up payroll users and then determine kind of what they can see. And then from there, we've also got security group settings where you can also separate users into certain groups. So maybe maybe you only want a certain payroll user to be able to see a certain group of employees and another payroll employee to be able to see another group or subset of employees. So you can also not only determine what employees can see, but you can determine which employees they can even access.
All right, thank you. And then who is responsible for sending tax info updates out? Is that Microsoft?
No, that's Primo Payday that's doing that. The app creator that's actually in charge of updating the tax tables.
All right. Well, it appears that those are the only questions that we have for you today. If anybody has any further questions that you would like to ask Whit, please do so now. Otherwise, feel free to contact your Innovia account rep, or you can reach out to the team at Nav Payroll. And I just want to thank Whit for presenting today, and to everyone on today's call, or if you are watching on demand, we thank you for joining us. And I just want to let you know that we do have a few more webinars coming soon. On Thursday this week, October 3rd, we have Steve Waltz from Innovia Consulting, and he's going to be talking to us about BCUG NAVUG Summit. We encourage you to come to this session if you would like to know more about Summit. We will be talking about how to pick your sessions for Summit, answer any of your questions that you may have, and just to help you get the most out of your Summit experience this year. And to add to that, Innovia is proud to be a platinum sponsor of BCUG NAVUG Summit in Orlando, Florida. And this conference is fast approaching. We've got about 2 weeks left, October 13th through the 18th. We will be at booth number 623, and NAV Payroll will be at booth 601. And if you haven't already registered, now is the time. Check out our conference page on our website, and that's innovia.com/conferences, or you can attend our webinar on Summit that I just mentioned. And check out our website for more of our upcoming events, and that's innovia.com/events. We also want to let you know about our new podcast that we have going on. It's called the Innovia Conversation. And you can find out about all the different podcast platforms to listen to on our podcast page, and that's innovia.com/podcast. So check out the selection and subscribe so you get notified when the new episodes air. All right, thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon on another Innovia webinar. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks, Whit.